Good morning. Monday, the 2nd of August, and Celtic's league campaign is underway. We're here to have a look at what happened at the weekend on the Celtic way with me, Andy Bargh, and Alison McConnell and Sean Martin. I think some people expected Celtic to lose against Midtjylland in the qualifier, felt that maybe the club and the team weren't ready for a tie of such magnitude. I don't think a defeat to Hearts was anticipated, Sean. That's how it transpired, 2-1 with a last-minute goal from John Souttar. Exposed more maybe weakness and question marks over the goalkeeping position, the way that header looked into the back of the net. How do you reflect on what unfolded on Saturday evening?
I think, just to address that first point, I think as much as the goalkeeper, the defence as well for that goal, I think need to be held culpable for it. But I mean, in general, in my match ratings for the website, I gave most players a 6 because although it ended in defeat, I didn't think any of them were actually terrible individually. I mean, yes, there were individual errors, of course, but it was mostly like that bit of cutting edge that was missing for large chunks of the game, especially in the first half when we had like 75% possession and didn't really do much with it. So I don't think it was that Celtic were desperately poor all evening. I just think that it was wasteful again.
Alison, I think we can agree Celtic should be beating Hearts 9 times out of 10, and given the form between the clubs, that's the way it has transpired over the last wee while. Celtic do normally beat Hearts, but it's important to have a bit of patience here as far as Celtic fans are concerned. This is a brand new era with a brand new style of football, a brand new manager.
Listen, you and I can sit and talk about the need for patience and to give the manager time, but the grim reality is that no manager gets time in this environment. I think at the minute, the general feeling is that none of these defeats are really hung on the head of the manager, given the chaos that he walked into and given the huge rebuilding job that needs to be done and the amount of players that clearly need to come in. So I think at the minute, he escapes criticism for the results, but that doesn't last for too long, as we all know. I think yes, in the real world, it's going to take time for Celtic to be able to turn it around. But the reality is that there won't be any such thing as real breathing space. People need to see progress. They want to see players coming in, and when you look at it, this month is huge for how the club goes into this month and how they come out of it can really shape what follows over the next 9 months, because the transfer window closed. There are numerous games coming in. The end the month with a trip to Ibrox. All these competitions that you face. There's a League Cup game. There's a Europa League qualifier. There's a potential for a Conference Cup tie. You have to come through them. You have to be able to bring some level of stability if you're going to put in tentative foundations to go on and establish yourself over the course of the campaign.
Yeah, Sean, hardly an ideal start with Rangers winning as well, and as Alison recognises, a trip to Ibrox at the end of the month. So, if a defeat was to occur there, then that would be, well, let's just say 6 points by the end of August, which is not a terrific scenario to find yourselves in. But Celtic can go there and I suppose pick up a result. We'll see what happens. I think you're right to recognise as well that the defensive performance for the winning goal for Hearts was a bit suspect. It was Carl Starfelt's first game. Don't think he really emphasised what he's all about. And with the first goal, I think that he was beaten quite easily by Josh Ginnelly, and then Liam Boyce kept him at arm's length without too much trouble before it fell to Mackay-Steven. But overall, what do you reckon about his introduction?
Well, on that first goal, I mean, he had 2 attempts to stop it. First with Ginnelly. I actually think Ginnelly went past him easier than what Liam Boyce held him off. I think he made it too easy for Liam Boyce by going to ground, even though he almost did actually stop the attack at that point. But I think to go to ground so easily to try and get it when he's clearly the bigger guy and is apparently like the answer to the centre-half problem, I think he would probably be disappointed to have went to ground so early there. Obviously couldn't quite stop it. And then it was just, I mean, the break of the ball, Beaton come across and towed it away, and it just happened to fault of all people Mackay-Steven. But in terms of Starfelt, he also got dragged infield a couple of times, I noticed. You probably remember when he just misjudged the flight of the ball a couple of times, but also one of the times when he ended up taking Liam Boyce right out of the game. But despite that, I mean, he did show some good defensive actions. and it's far too early to be judging what he'll actually bring to the team week in, week out. I think he'd done all right, given that he was rushed straight in.
Alison, did you think that it was less than average, decent?
I think what it showed is just that so many of the problems that existed last season remain. I think how many times did you watch Celtic dominate a game, dominate the ball, create a lot of chances and concede silly goals that were fairly easily preventable. I thought, to go back over that winning goal, for me, Nira Beaton was culpable. I thought he was out-jumped for it. But I think what you're watching is a situation now where you have a new manager in place, but still so much of the infrastructure and so much of the squad still has to change. So you're seeing a very, very similar level of performance from what we watched throughout the entirety of the last campaign. I think there are deficiencies still within this side. I think there's a significant body of work required to be done, and I would count the internal workings of the club and how they set up in terms of recruitment and fitness and analytics, in terms too of the amount of players that need to come in and reinforce positions. Because if you had to do a compare and contrast with the level of player and the standard and quality of where Celtic were maybe 3 seasons ago and compare each position with now, I think you can see that there has been a significant step back the way.
Sean, I suppose some of the accusations that have been levelled at David Turnbull recently have been that when the going gets tough, he's not really rolling his sleeves up. Was that an accurate representation for Saturday?
I mean, it's hard to say that when the first half especially, it was all Celtic on the ball. I know they scored early on, but it was still all Celtic, so it's hard to say he's not putting in the effort necessarily. I thought he actually did look a wee bit more involved than he did against Midtjylland. But he's clear. I mean, he has clearly still got to turn it on. There's wee touches still here and there, and I realise you're probably getting more at the kind of off the ball work that Ange's wanting them to do. But I think he's getting a wee bit more involved. But as I say, still got to turn it on.
Alison, I think that there are high hopes for David Turnbull. He had a good introductory season. Some people probably raised an eyebrow that he didn't feature for Scotland in the European Championship after such good form for Celtic. Do you think this is an important year for him?
Of course it is, but I think too you have to temper your expectations with just where he is as a player. This is a very new environment he came into. He didn't start last season. He only came to the fore in the latter half of the campaign, and he came into a team that was all over the place. It was under the cosh. It was under terrific amounts of pressure as things fell apart. I think you need to be patient with him. I think you have to remember he is a very young player. I think we've all seen the capabilities and the potential that he has. I think it's about how you nurture that and how you manage it. And I think it's probably important that he's playing alongside players that just have a bit more experience that can coach him too while he's on the park. I think you just have to be careful of putting him under too much pressure at the minute.
Celtic did they did score a perfectly fine goal that was chalked off. I think Greg Taylor was the one that was ruled to be just on the wrong side of the last defender before he cut it back. As by the by in the end. But Edouard was another one of the forward players. Here's Fraser Annan just saying he doesn't want him to be near Celtic Park for the coming season. Do you think that an exit is needing? And how do you assess how he did at the weekend? Because there has been debate, I suppose, about if he's the right striker to be playing, if he's angling for a move or likely to move away from the club this month, Sean.
In terms of to take the Hearts game first, I didn't think it was as lethargic a display as he was accused of against Midtjylland. He didn't really get much service in the first half despite all that possession. Obviously, nominally anyway, picked up an assist for laying it off to Anthony Ralston. He did play, you can't doubt his quality when he gets the ball to the feet. I know he takes too many touches sometimes in the box, but certainly his link-up play is something that Celtic will miss, and he played a lovely touch under pressure as well to play through James Forrest for that chance near the end that Craig Gordon saved.
Alison, do you fully expect him to be away in the coming weeks?
Yeah, I think we've spoken about this often. In fact, I think we've spoken about this really for the last 12 months. I think this will be the window where he goes. I think what you're seeing just now is a player whether it's conscious or unconscious, what you're seeing as a player who's very much playing within himself at the minute. I think he's maybe just wary of being fully committed in case you pick up an injury, you jeopardise a move. And I'm not sure that's entirely deliberate, but I think we've not seen the Odsonne Edouard of a year ago or a year and a half ago when he just seemed to have that extra burst. He just seemed to have that final finish. I don't know how fair some of the criticism has been. I think it's inevitable that when you are, the likelihood is that you're going to move on when it's been fairly clear that you wish to move on. I think it invites a certain scrutiny about performance levels and about your commitment to the team. But I think overall he's the best striker that's at the club. I think as long as he's been paid, that you have to play him and you have to hope that he chips in with a few goals before he goes. But to answer your question, will he still be a Celtic player in September? I wouldn't have thought so.
Well, his buddy Olivier Ntcham is officially away from the club. That's a weird scenario, I think, guys, the way that's played out. Celtic were fending off interest just recently for Olivier Ntcham in the last 18 to 24 months. Clubs like Porto were sniffing around making bids that Celtic weren't interested in accepting for 12-13 million pounds roughly. He's now had his, well, it would seem his contract torn up a year early, and he's free to go and find a club at his whim. I think that it's the Lazio goal is a saving grace for Olivier Ntcham in his Celtic career. Sean, how do you look back on the impact or the lesser impact of Olivier Ntcham?
I think it. First of all, I think it looks bad that he's going to be going into the failure column in terms of players that the club couldn't develop themselves for a profit. It should really have been in the success column given the talent that he's clearly got, but he'll probably be remembered as one of those players that you can't really hear his name without saying, oh, how good could he have been, etc., etc. I mean, you mentioned it there. He has had high points like Rome, and he scored a derby winner. But ultimately, I think the last impression that he's made over the past year or so is not too positive, to put it kindly.
Alison, he's in the last 3 seasons, he's played exactly 50% of Celtic's league games. And for a player of such talent, who was bought for a substantial fee, around 4 million or so, and Celtic were rejecting even more substantial bids for him, that's not really a justifiable return, is it?
No, I agree with Sean. I think there's a lingering feeling and suspicion that there's a player in Olivier Ntcham, but we just, in terms of Scottish football, we haven't really seen it. We've seen it in snapshots, but in terms of a sustained and consistent and dominant performance, I think that first season when he came in as a young player, I think he looked capable of getting into this dominant midfield player. I just don't think we've seen it. I think the frustration is that it looks as though it could still be there, but quite clearly, I think obviously the best thing for both parties is to go and move on. But I think from the minute that there was interest, from the minute that the club knocked back Porto a couple of seasons back, I think there was just a chasm between the commitment between the player and the club. I think he was a bit unhappy that he wasn't allowed to go, and ever since then, I think it's always been a selling job almost from the club to say, come and let's see what you can do.
Does the way that the resolution has been found to this scenario just kind of sum up the instability and the environment that Celtic find themselves in at the moment, Sean? That Olivier Ntcham, who could have been sold for a profit 2 seasons ago, has then barely played since and has now just had his contract cancelled.
I think so, but at the same time, like how much do you hold the club responsible for a player checking out for all intents and purposes? I mean, you could argue that they should know who they're dealing with and that everybody works with them day in, day out, so they should know if it's likely that he's going to kind of check out if he doesn't get the move at first time asking, or if he's going to be one of those players that knuckles down and tries to actually do even better to get a better move kind of thing. But I still think it's quite harsh to be saying that the Ntcham situation in particular is a bad reflection on the way they handled it necessarily, although the outcome certainly reflects badly that they couldn't quite find some sale from, considering that he definitely has got the talent.
That's the thing. Sorry. That's the thing, though. I think that there's levels of professionalism, and Olivier Ntcham probably should have rolled the sleeves up a bit higher and carried on with his job that he's paid to do. But Alison, what I'm asking is, why did Celtic not back such a fair and substantial offer for him at a time when it seemed right to sell?
I don't know that the club would have seen it as the right time to sell. I think when the offer came in from Porto, there were glimpses of what he was. He was still a very young player. I think there were high hopes that he would continue his development. I think that there was a feeling that if he stayed, developed, progressed, that there would have been a bigger move. I think it's very difficult to see down the line. Sometimes it's easier in hindsight when you look back now at the mess that it's become when you say you should have cashed in when you could have. I think Artur Boruc comes to mind here too. The club knocked back big money offers and eventually ran down his contract before moving. But I think at the time when that bid came in, I don't think you can predict the player's reaction to it, and I think the motives behind wishing to keep him were good. I think it was about trying to keep what they saw was a strong midfield player who could maybe have stayed another season and developed. What you didn't see was a failure to develop. So the question is, where do the faults for that lie? Is it a combination of the attitude of the player and the club? Where does your blame lie in terms of the development over the last 2 seasons, really?
So you think then that the club are maybe foreseeing that they could have received a bid or a deal similar to the Tierney, Dembele, and what they hope to get for Edouard, Sean, that sort of level, 20 plus?
Well, I think that's the kind of the point that Alison's making, is that at the time when that bid came in, they probably still thought he can still progress a wee bit better. So why would we cash in when potentially you can get a bid, like you said, for the kind of Tierney money? If he had progressed, obviously he didn't progress, and if anything, he regressed. So again, I still think it's pretty harsh to be, maybe too harsh to be suggesting the club are at fault for it, unless it's the suggestion that they should have known the type of character that they were dealing with by knocking back the Porto bid. That's the only thing I can really think of, because otherwise it lies with the player largely, I would say.
Okay, well, I suppose there are more spaces in midfield that need to be filled in the squad just to keep things competitive. One player that's been linked, and not for the first time, is James McCarthy. He's a free agent, I believe, after leaving Crystal Palace, where he did play quite a significant amount of football just in the season before last, 33 Premier League games. Last season, 16, so about half the campaign. He has been susceptible to injuries throughout his time, but he's played at a top level for a long time. He's now 30 years old, though, I think. Is this somebody that you would be happy to see come in the door, Sean?
At this point, especially in that position, a bit of experience wouldn't go amiss, I think. But it does feel as if Celtic have been linked to McCarthy every year since he was about 16. He might be a useful addition, and there's no doubt he is a competent player. But it's another one to me that just seems as if the club's scouting filter is just set to who can't cut it in the Premier League anymore and might fancy coming north. That said, they do need another central midfielder in there, especially to compete with Sorrow for me. And someone more experienced than Sorrow would probably be best. So I'm not against it. I don't think it would be a bad move.
On that subject about players who might fancy a move up north, do you think there's maybe a bit of a Shane Duffy about this, where he's a Celtic fan and he can kind of maybe endear himself to the fans quite easily because of that?
I would hope not. I mean, you never know. You don't know what's behind it. I'd imagine it's the fact that he's a free agent rather than the fact he's a Celtic fan. But we'll see.
Alison, have you heard much about this?
No, I think, as Sean says, I think it's a perennial transfer link at this point in the season. Every time, I think the fact he's a free agent probably makes it attractive to the club. I think he's at a stage in his career where the move itself might be enticing, but I'm not entirely sure how much substance there is to it.
All right, okay, well, that's a good 20 minutes up there, guys. So thanks for joining me on the Celtic Way, and we'll be back again tomorrow morning, where I suppose we'll start looking ahead to the Europa League tie against Jablonec on Thursday. All right, so join us again tomorrow. Thanks.